What do you believe is the biggest challenge facing CEOs in the non-profit sector today?
What's good change and what's bad change? We as a sector have to go through amazing change, and we know that the world around us is changing. But a lot of the change, and I love change, I'm a change agent, I'm driving that all the time in the organisation, but what I'm concerned about is that we're actually losing our values a little bit now. The focus is to become more sustainable, to become more self-sufficient. I have no difficulty with that. It's a very competitive marketplace. We're adopting more and more of the commercial paradigm in what we're doing, at a danger of, in fact, losing sight that sometimes that's the wrong paradigm. I used to work in the area of disability, and it was politically incorrect to talk about sheltered workshops. I understand that. And then they were called business services, and that name change started quite a dramatic shift in how the government and the public understood what was going on, and the emphasis became on business as opposed to service, because it really was supposed to be a mix of two things. And that's what's happening now in aged care, in childcare, in disability, in a lot of things. It's this mix between business and service. And we need to be clear on what our social return on investment is. We need to be clear on what the social outcome is. We need to demonstrate the economic impact of that and why that should be supported. We've got a government who's driving a business model that is not consistent with often the service model or what's required, even though they think it is. They're actually putting in taxes that actually work as a disincentive to the service model. They want a service model, but they don't want to fund the service model. They want a business model. And what they're actually creating is a competitive dynamic that's not necessarily leading to good outcomes for the consumer, for the society, and for the organisations themselves. And what we've got to work out is which change we need to embrace and which change we need to challenge. And it's becoming harder to do that.
There are a number of. First one is competition. Competition is huge. Second one is regulation and compliance. Those two elements, regulation and compliance, sadly, brings into the element of high risk. We are in a risk-adverse environment. Immediately you've got compliance, regulation and risk, you're not likely to be innovative. So competition, regulation environment, I think changing government directions is a challenge. Sadly, we tend to not be the leaders, we tend to be the followers. We should be the initiators of new regulation. I think within the not-for-profit area is the fact that for-profit organisations are coming into the not-for-profit world. We tend to not take that as a positive contribution, but we see that as a threat. We actually need to embrace that.
I think the biggest challenge for us at the moment is the reforms. I think the reforms in especially disability and aged care would be setting us up for a whole new world of challenges, issues, problems to face, but also opportunities. For instance, the NDIS is changing the way we deliver disability, and it's a fantastic opportunity, but it's going to have some failings. There's going to be some market failures, and for us, carers are going to be receiving different services and supports in the future. And then obviously aligned to that is this whole change from program funding and funding organisations to consumer-directed care and putting the dollar in individuals' hands to purchase services. That's going to be challenging for an organisation such as ours. And so I think the reforms and funding and then everything that falls out from that. But I think very recently, obviously, change of government. We had this relationship with the previous government. We had a whole train of ideas and initiatives in process with them. And overnight, we have to stop and say, okay, is this going to be relevant to the new government and the new government's direction?
I think it's probably been the same for some time. I think it's how do you continue to grow? So how do you get the resources you need to have sustained growth, and with that growth then continue to grow. So really resources continues to be a huge issue. I think a lot of the issues related to volunteers, which we are a massive volunteer sector, is about the legislation that surrounds volunteers and how we as an organisation manage that, especially when the states are not aligned often in the way the legislation works. So it's related to resources overall, I believe.
I think mergers and acquisitions is another big challenge of the future. And I think coming back to previous questions, I think the focus on short-termism is a high risk that organisations in the not-for-profit world need to actually address. A strong, focused, aligned vision and strategy is really key, that is regularly reviewed, is a critical security blanket in order to be able to deal with all the elements that may come an impact on a not-for-profit these days.